Absolutely. Yep. And that's exactly where we should start, is to just go around the table. What I would like to hear is, say your name and a little bit about, what your job is maybe, but also what I'd really like to hear is how you ended up in Gillette, and what, some of the most important things to you are about this community and your place in it, your family. Just let us get to know you just a little bit. And so I thought that's how we could start. So maybe we could start with Doug.
Sure. Doug Gerard. I'm a software engineer. I do a lot of work with NASCAR and Formula One and different racing series, building test equipment for various automotive components. Ended up in Gillette because of my wife's job, who, if you don't know my wife, that's a good thing because she's an emergency physician. And so, although she no longer works at the hospital here, she actually works in Newcastle now. And that's been a good move for her. But we ended up here because she was working at the hospital for, a good 10, 12 years as well. And one of the nice things about Gillette for me is, is my wife and I choose to live here. This is where we want to make our living. We don't have to be here. I mean, I can do my job anywhere, and she's in demand across the country, but we want to be here. One of the neat things is, for me, is that, I grew up 60 miles east of Buffalo, right off of I-90 in Rochester, New York. And God willing, I'm going to die 60 miles east of Buffalo, right off of I-90, but just here in Gillette, because this is home for me. It's one of the few places that's ever felt like home. So.
And do you have any children or anything?
No children, 6 dogs, gosh knows how many cats, a donkey, and a horse.
Yeah. And you're the chair of the GOP in
Yes,
Campbell County?
I am.
Okay. I'm Louise Carter King. I'm the mayor here in Gillette, and my family's been here since 1975. My dad was mayor in the 80s, and we've owned a business for 40 years now here in Gillette, down on Main Street. And my family's always loved Gillette since we've come here. So I've got 2 kids, and I've still got, I believe, 3 siblings who still live here. And so.
Yeah. And what kind of business do you have?
I have an office supply downtown.
Yeah. All right. And how old are your children, if I can ask?
Let's see. Casey is 30-something, and Alex is 22. He plays hockey at University of Utah. Yeah. So, but he went to Gillette. He was a graduate of Gillette College, just by the way. Yes.
Finest graduates.
Alec.
I'm Alec Bob. I'm a maintenance electrician at Bel Air Mine. I've been there as an electrician for 10, worked for the company for 11. Grew up in southern Utah, actually. Joined the Navy and actually met a friend who was from the Buffalo Claremont area. Come out to visit one Christmas, fell in love with the area, the people, and made plans to move up here after my service. I've got 2 kids. They're 19 and 13. I enjoy Gillette because I've made a lot of friends here. It's a great community, pretty tight-knit. It's kind of centrally based because I'm an avid outdoorsman. It's kind of centrally based between the Black Hills and the Bighorns. And I enjoy what it has to offer. It's got a lot of business opportunities as well as work opportunities for somebody just starting.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Leah Vader, and I've lived in Gillette since 1997, and I came here with my spouse, Lynn Huskinson, who's here, and she's a coal miner, and she'd been working here, but I was raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was born in Kansas City, lived in Glendale Heights, Illinois for a while, but at 8 years old, moved to Minneapolis, went to University of Minnesota. Well, my dad and my brother were both in the Navy, so I'm glad to hear this Navy person here. I don't think I'd be sitting here if it wasn't for my dad. It's like, religion and politics were both really important. He was a U.S. history degree, but worked as a salesman to support the family. So he's very much a businessman. But boy, oh boy, we were an informed family, and Watergate was just fun times, listening to the radio, and staying informed was really important. But since I've been in Gillette, I've worked at the Recycling Center for 4 years. I worked at Gillette Abuse Refuge Foundation for 4 years. So, and I worked with people with disabilities when I worked at Recycling, so that was through Renew. I did some waitressing. For the past 10 years, I've been a migratory worker. I worked part of the year in Arizona, as a bald eagle nest watcher, wildlife biologist, and I work in Indian land there. And in the summer, last 7 summers, I've been up from Du Bois at Ring Lake Ranch, leading hikes at an ecumenical retreat center. So Wyoming, to me, is the outdoors, and Gillette is so beautifully nestled between the Black Hills and the Bighorns. Our kids are 4 grown kids from 33 to 29, and it was just great having them grow up at least part of the time out here, going fishing and just exploring.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lynn Huskinson. My dad moved here in 1977, my senior year of high school, which was a problem, but I'm a coal miner. I've worked at Bel Air a short time and then at Eagle Butte for 38 years. I wasn't always a big fan of Gillette just because I wanted to be closer to the mountains. Actually, I lived in Buffalo for a while. But I've grown to really appreciate, how accepting the community is, and I've met a lot of nice people, and I just really enjoy living in Gillette.
Yeah, settled in.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom.
I'm Tom Fisk. I'm the rector at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. I've been in Gillette now for 11 years. And I moved to Gillette because I had to get out of Minnesota. A long serpentine route to get me here. I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I've spent time in one of those sheep wagons. So I'm a Western kind of guy, and so I'm happy to be on this side of the Missouri. Gillette has been, thank you for that, it's been a very open and friendly town, and we've just simply enjoyed our time here. I have 2 sons, one of whom is a graduate of Gillette High School and of Gillette Community College also. So now it's your turn.
My name is Jessica Diaz, and I'm not here to represent my job, but I do work for the school district as a student assistance coordinator. So I do a lot of assistance and a lot of coordination with not just the school district, but also our community as a whole. I work with Father Tom, suicide prevention, drug and alcohol prevention. We do a lot of prevention, a lot of public health to the community. But I'm here to represent my Latino community, my Spanish speakers. I'm here to represent what we go through here in the sense of immigration in Gillette. Some of us feel safe, some of us don't. I enjoy Gillette only because I help so many people and they need me, and I think that's a good thing. My husband doesn't like it very much because there's not much of a culture of different other cultures, but he's enjoying it now. So,
And what does he do?
he works for hot iron for construction and pipeline, and we have a son, and we're expecting another.
Congratulations.
So, March.
That's exciting. That's wonderful.
So cool.
Right.
Well, I think so far, everyone who's spoken, we all have something really amazing in common. I, too, am a Navy brat. My father was a lifer in the Navy. He was a ship's doctor on the Kearsarge and the Essex, and he's much older than my mom, so he passed away when I was quite young. But I was born and raised in Laguna Beach, California, and lived there for the first 30 years. I went to UCLA and enjoyed the culture in Southern California. And then my first bout with skin cancer, I decided I was heading north. So I went to Seattle. And I spent 22 years in Seattle. And Seattle was going great. I was, sort of between marriages, let's call it that. And I was coaching the United States equestrian team for people with disabilities. And I was at the World Equestrian Games. We're in Lexington, Kentucky in October of 2010. And we had finished our run, and my rider finished 9th in the world, which was quite good for a little girl from Seattle. And I was driving the horse home because he was such a brat. He couldn't go with anybody else. He had to go alone, didn't play well with others.
And I broke down on the side of the road in this little town called Rosette, Wyoming. And this guy stopped to help me that was coming home from hunting, and he had 7 guns and a deer carcass in the back, and I was a vegan. And here's this vegan with this cowboy that stops to help me, and sort of one thing led to another. And I moved here about 6 months later. We have since gotten married, and we had a daughter through foster care that actually Jessica knows. First thing she asked me today when she saw me, and we had her for a few years, and then we adopted her. And she has since graduated from high school, and she's going to the college.
Excellent.
So clever segue to you.
That's a perfect pass-off. Maybe I'll just stop right there. Huh?
Nope. You don't
Well, I do have a question. Did you get your husband to eat soybeans?
No, but he raises beef, so I eat meat. He'll do anything
Life
for
changes,
love, right?
doesn't it?
Yeah. I kind of forgot to say what I did.
Oh, yes, please.
I'm a social worker, and I'm not here representing the Salvation Army, although I do work for the Salvation Army. But I've also worked in youth development here in town and at a couple different places, both teaching preschool to kids with disabilities as well as working at a residential treatment facility here in town.
Right, thank you.
My name's Mark Englert. I'm the Vice President and CEO of Gillette College. I'm in my 8th year at the college. That's hard to believe how quickly that goes. I have a long history. I've been in the Northern Wyoming Community College District for 32 years, so most of my time was in Sheridan. But when the CEO of Gillette College got the presidency of the district, and Paul Young, he moved over to Sheridan, he afforded me the opportunity to come over here and take the leadership role of this campus, which has been the greatest career opportunity that I have ever had. It's just been incredible. And I've loved education. My entire life has been in education and helping others. But what we've been able to do here is just, in my mind, incredible in serving students and shaping people. So it's kind of, my wife and I have we've had an interesting 8 years because she's the director of the dental hygiene program over in Sheridan. And I spend my time over here. So we have a home in each community, and depending on what's going on the weekend is where we settle in. And we were able to do that because our children are off to the University of Wyoming in college. And we're strong enough in our faith that we just were able to work that out. However, I have announced my retirement in about a year because we've come to the point in our lives where it's time to share the remainder of it together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sounds great. Senator?
I am Michael Von Flater, and I'm the senator from Gillette. I came here about a year before Louise's dad. I think in '74 I got here. So I'm amazed there's actually nobody at this table that is from Gillette. Is born and raised here.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, everybody's come from somewhere else. So I came here.
Is that kind of is that typical, do you think, of the community?
I'd say probably 75% of this community is from somewhere else. And so I came here because of a job. Like everybody else, I was welding in the oil field, went to a coal mine, worked at Bel Air Mine, which everybody's been to at some point or another, it seems like, as far as the coal miners in this group. I am presently in my 13th year, just finished my 13th year at the Senate. Hopefully I'm good till 2020 unless I get, impeached somewhere along the way, which we're hoping doesn't happen, but you never can tell. So other than that, I am glad to be here, and it will be an interesting conversation.
Yes. Well, so what I'm hoping is that we can do is kind of create a, out of this very multifaceted group of people that we have here, create kind of a story of Gillette and what it's been like to be here over the last few years. It's been a bumpy road, but what I was thinking might be a good place, and maybe you guys might not agree, and we should go back a bit further. But I'm thinking that it might be good to start to kind of talk about what was going on in Gillette during the Obama years, when there was a lot more regulation of the energy industry starting to happen, and simultaneously, natural gas prices were starting to compete with the price of coal. And, just kind of give us an idea of what it was like during that time period. Anybody feel like they would like to talk about what that was like in Gillette during that era?
Well, I could start it off here for a second. I would say in 2008, we actually peaked in about 10 or 12, I think was the highest price of coal. So in reality, from about 08 to about 2012, it didn't matter who the administration was because we were doing so well, and the price of gas peaked in about 06 or 07, shot up to $8 at some point, went back down, but the coal was selling well. We couldn't, everybody was employed. We couldn't really find enough people to employ. That was probably the single biggest issue we had going. And then about 13 or 14, I think it was in 14, the leases went away as far as a ban on new coal leases because they wanted to revamp the program according to the president and his administration at that time. So his first 4 or 5 years were really good for us. We were really booming, and then it caught up, and then the price of gas went so low, and it really was the price of natural gas going so low that hurt us.
Yeah. Some of you guys who worked in that industry have any personal stories to tell about those years of just, that things were going pretty well, and then there became kind of talk of maybe, things not going as well for the coal industry.
Well, at that time, it was kind of difficult for everybody because, like I said before, it sounded like a personal attack towards coal miners as individuals when he said he was going to shut coal miners down. And so we were worried, but like Michael had said, coal sales were good in those first 4 or 5 years of his administration, but then the legislation caught up and they started implementing their rules and regulations. Gas come down, and it all just kind of took effect all at once. So a lot of the coal miners and my fellow coworkers were worried. Usually one of the first things that a coal company does is they start making cuts, budget cuts, manpower, equipment, how many coal sales they actually make. It became really tough, really scary. Everybody was worried about their jobs. The coal mine is a good stable, has been a good stable working environment usually, but now it was time to either make drastic changes to your life or find something else.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of my friends and everything that moved out of town.
Did you see people start to move?
Melodie, if I could
Yes.
interject, because you said it earlier when we went around the table and we're doing the introductions, is that no one is really from Gillette, but everyone has decided to make Gillette their home for a reason. So when you have this downturn, it makes people extremely uncomfortable because they've made a conscious decision to stay in Gillette, be engaged with the wonderful people that we've heard about, and it's a very open community, and all of a sudden that's challenged a little bit. So you're making decisions about, well, can I find a way to stay, or am I going to have to leave? And if we even go back before the era that you've described, and Louise's mom and dad, people were instrumental in really turning that industry into a big investment for the community, to grow the community, to make it a place that it mixes with its people, and a bit of the culture that it has, and the niceties, making it a solid community. So having been a part of growing that, and then all of a sudden that may be compromised, is a real threat to a community and its citizens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I was driving in, I was just totally impressed with the amount of sculpture and public art that's going on in this community. And it's just, it's a beautiful community. A lot of care has been taken to build this town over the, generations, clearly.
Intentional, too, not by accident.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of strong community ties here. Everybody, whether you know them or not, will stop and help you.
Just like me.
Just like Jenny and Pat.
That's how I ended up
And
here.
that's exactly why I moved to this area.
Yeah, yeah.
I was actually living over in Lynch, Wyoming, when a buddy of mine, we met him at a roping, and he was a the lead welder at a welding company here in town and got us hired on, and that's when we made the move. So, and I never knew the guy. He hired me, worked out great, and I've been here ever since 2000.
Yeah, yeah.
So the ties in this community, and obviously sitting at this table, most everybody here knows each other from some form or another. So that shows you something
That's right.
there.
Yeah, some strong ties. And so then, you know, I know that, you know, the price of coal began to drop. Bankruptcy started to be a word that was going around a little bit. The Clean Power Plan came along. What were the feelings in the community? What was being said? Was there a sense of people starting to have different, you know, opposing views and not being able to talk about these things, in maybe starting to have some difficulty talking about what was going on with the coal industry and the jobs in this community?
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, this would be 2014, thereabouts, Leadership Wyoming, if you're not familiar, this is a big program. And I was part of it, and they had an event up here in Gillette, and they asked me to come and sit in on a group over at the college, and we went around for all the tables. They had about 15 of us locals running around, going table to table, talking about what's the economy like and all of this. And it got to the very last table, and I was going through telling folks, well, things aren't as good here as I'd like to think. If you go down to right, you go door to door. You know, when I was campaigning, I'd see one out of every house would either be for sale and one out of every 10 of those was foreclosed, that kind of thing. And seeing that, and I was doing that in Gillette, in neighborhoods where you wouldn't expect to see that, and you were seeing it. And what struck me that was really interesting is that I was the only one. One of the Leadership Wyoming participants said, everybody else says things going great up here in Gillette. How come you're the only one saying that? And I told him it's because I'm probably the only one that went door to door and actually saw this firsthand. And and I think that there was I don't know if it's having a different opposing views, but I just don't think people were that aware of it because they weren't out doing it,
Right.
out seeing it. So.
They weren't on the streets actually
Yeah.
interacting and seeing that up close. Yeah, Tom.
Maybe Louise could add a little bit more to this, but there's a sense in which Gillette has always, I understand that Gillette has always had a bust and a boom mentality. There's even in the DSM-4 there is a diagnosis of Gillette syndrome. Really, there is.
That's hilarious.
For stress-related bust and boom anxieties. And so, from my perspective, Gillette has always had that kind of we can do sort of attitude, regardless of the economic situation, because we've been in these bust and boom cycles. The city has been in these bust and boom cycles so often. When I first came to Gillette, my fear was always for the working poor and how the working poor were making ends meet, and the working poor have always been here, and I dare say will always be here. Somebody said that, right? The poor will always be with you, right? Yeah.
That's me.
But so anyway, yeah. So I don't know. I'd like to hear what Louise might have to say about that, being the long-term Gilletteite here.
Well, and Michael, of course.
Yeah.
But it being in business and seeing the city, he's right. There's always been, in the energy industry, that's just what it is. This last one, though, does seem like it was a perfect storm, because not only was natural gas down, oil down, and coal, but you had an administration who also seemed like they were working against us. And I think that was hard on the long term. The market prices, we're used to those, that they usually work themselves out. But the administration, we haven't been faced with, kind of a country against us or something. And the city started about 7 years ago inviting congressional members from DC to come out here and tour a coal mine, our power plant, Devil's Tower, the Buffalo Ranch, just to show them our type. And every one of them, number one, they came, and we had people ask us for masks. They thought they would need a mask when they were here. We had people ask if we cleaned our houses, washed our houses before they came. I mean, people had this misconception, and these are the people that are making our regulations. So one, it was like picking up that starfish and throwing it back in the sea, but one person at a time. And we finally saw it when Trump got elected. He appointed Senator Branton. Now I can't think of his name for sure, but he had been on our tour, and he was appointed to the EPA. And you know, we finally got to see something because someone up in the administration actually had been here. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we felt no one else was helping us, you know, anywhere. So we felt we had to start doing something. And Northeast Wyoming, all the communities, Wright and Buffalo and Sheridan all joined in, and Sundance. And we bring these people out every year. And they say it's the hot ticket to come out on because it's such a you know, a great, you know, I bring them in August, so it's beautiful. And anyway, that's
just to help people kind of be able to actually see. It's kind of like what you were talking about, going door to door. It's really hard to realize what what's really going on the ground if you're not actually coming out and visiting and getting to know people and seeing
our blue skies, our clean air, and you know, what we are trying to do. So that's, you know, that was our perspective. Is yes, we've been in. But one thing I'd like to say is back in the 70s and 80s when we had these buses, people would not think a minute about loading up the U-Haul and getting out of here, going somewhere else. This time it was different. People did not want to leave. These are their homes. People came here to stay 2 or 3 years, make some money, and move on. Those same people are here, and they have kids and grandkids. And so it is a community for people to live in, and they love it. And how you know that is how many people have moved away, and they come back and say, we didn't know how good it was here. I mean, you know, we didn't know how well we had it. And so
lots of people coming back.
Yes.
So then we saw that the coal industry really did tank. We saw just a huge number of layoffs. It was like 465 in a week. What was that like to be in Gillette that week? Can you guys talk about your personal experiences?
I'd like to address, I did not feel the panic that, you know, like maybe it was because I'd been in the industry for so long, but I wasn't, and I'd been through cycles of ups and downs, and I felt relatively calm. I knew people were going to lose their jobs. We didn't have the massive layoffs that, like Black Thunder and North Antelope, but they're bigger mines, and I didn't pick up on this huge fear. I wasn't like, I'm going to lose my job, because I'd had my job and maybe I was complacent, but I'm more fearful of the administration right now. I was at ease with Obama, because maybe it's my faith life or just being in the industry as long as I was. I was not like going to go to work afraid all the during the Obama years, you were okay with some of like the Clean Power Plan when that was implemented. Some of those things they didn't concern you that you would, you know, that might lead to you losing your job at some point. It could be that I'm in the twilight of my career and I'm not, you know, like 10 years in. I'm, you know, I would find a different way. There's all kinds of ways to make Gillette great, and there, you know, we always bounce back, it seems. And the coal industry is a dying industry. It's not going to be here. We're not going to, like, I don't see my coworkers 30 years at the same job. It's, you know. So you kind of felt like that some of those regulations, maybe it was time for some of those things that you were concerned about, climate change. Yes, I am concerned about climate change, yes, even though I'm a coal miner. And so that was something that you were okay with
a certain amount of regulation of the industry that you.
I would be willing to be trained to do another job, but again, I'm at the end of my career, and I don't see myself retiring. And, I mean, like, if I retire from the coal mine, I would find something different. But we've got to change sometime. We can't depend on coal forever.
Yeah.
And I think the last, when we went into this quasi-depression layoff term a year ago, it would have been the end of the Obama administration, which had the Clean Power Plan, and it was much easier to focus on hating an administration than it was on focusing on, price of natural gas is $2.20. Well, that's really sad, and that's what's driving it. But once again, even from the 70s, we paid for the sins of others when the oil prices went in the tank, and so all the coal mines went for sale because they're all owned by oil companies. And so we had to slack, and we had the layoffs, we had the low prices for our coal. The same thing happened this time. We also, they invested highly in the coking industry back east in Appalachia and in Australia, and found themselves, coke went from a couple $100 a ton down to $50 or $60 a ton, and they had based it on $180 a ton, and so they couldn't afford it. So we ended up getting laid off, and we ended up taking the brunt of them trying to, and they're filing for bankruptcy on top of this, and yet it was the small companies here that it really ate it for them, because if you had a bill into a Peabody and or a Arch, and they declared bankruptcy, your invoice to them was worthless at that point. So we paid for the sins of others, once again.
Others have thoughts or responses to that, those thoughts?
Well, one thing, I think there can be, in 30 years, people working in the coal market, because we have the Integrated Test Center. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but it's what the governor put $15 million into, so that, and the X Prize came there. The X Prize is a foundation that gives prizes, millions of dollars, to whomever can come up with the best idea for coal and its byproducts, mainly carbon. And this X Prize that they've done, and they've done others, space industry was one, to see who could get the first flight around the universe or something. I don't know, I think they're still out there. But they had the most interest in this project. There was 57 teams from around the world that applied, and they're narrowing that down to 5. Those 5 will be housed out at the Dry Fork Power Plant, and in 2020 they will announce the winner of who came up with the most viable, economical, best use for carbon. But just because there's one winner, those other 4 won't be bad ideas. So I feel that just from that alone, there could be lots of other uses for coal and carbon. And we are sitting on 600 years of coal in the Powder River Basin. Why would anyone turn their backs on a plentiful, inexpensive resource like that? So with the way research and ingenuity and engineering goes, I think coal will be in our future for many, many, many years.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will be in our future. I think the jobs will look very different, and how, what extraction looks like, and what automation is going to do to the industry. And going back, from the college perspective, one of the things that we witnessed with the big layoffs that we hadn't seen in other times is the mobilization of the states. So we're getting calls from the governor and the Department of Workforce Services, and they're mobilizing, coming up here, working with our folks, and we're basically triaging individuals who have been laid off, and seeing if we can counsel them into other careers, if there are short-term programs that we might be able to provide that would assist them in securing other employment. One lost segment of the population was the trailing spouse, because the trailing spouse was the one who's going to have to take up a job and bring money into the household. The reality is, as much as we did that and made ourselves accessible, at the point in time, most of the layoffs were dealing with severance. So the employees were trying to work through their severance packages to see what that meant and see where they were in their careers. Can I call this the end of my career, or do we have to relocate to another state? So people said, well, you probably saw a big jump in enrollment. No, we've seen a steady increase in enrollment, but not from that population, from a population who thought maybe they would get jobs at the mines or in oil and gas, and those jobs are not available now. They're coming to us, but not so much the people who lost the jobs or got severance pay. And I maintain today that as a state, we better take a serious look at the number that we saw. 7,000 people from our workforce left the state. That puts us in a precarious position when you're trying to diversify economies or continue, if oil and gas come back, and they will, and coal comes back, and it will. How are you going to prepare your workforce? How are you going to attract your workforce? And that's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Other thoughts on that time period? Other people's experiences there?
Just one thing
Yeah.
Michael said that's sticking with me is that,
Sure.
is about hating the administration. And it really wasn't for me and for a lot of folks. I think it wasn't so much about hating the administration as just what's going to come next. What was, I just looked up a quote here.
Yeah.
Niemuller's, said first they came for the socialists. Okay, Martin Niemöller. And he did nothing.
we
It
go.
goes on. And that was, okay, so first they came for the coal miners. Well, what's next? If you don't toe the line on healthcare, what's going to happen to you now? What are they going to come after you? And because you don't do it the right way, so we want you out of here. And I think that people felt very persecuted and very, and quite frankly, what else is going to happen? And in the Obama years, that was kind of, I think, the de rigueur because, we were all Bible-clutching gun owners that, God forbid, we actually stand up and say things and actually hold our positions. And that was, I think, something that was more palpable than hating the administration. It's just what's next,
Yeah, yeah.
And yet, I mean, I just want to say that the hate, you see racist flyers at the oil change place, showing that this is a tar ball, washing up on the beach, and it was Obama, and Lynn saw racist, very racist things. There was a float in the Holiday Light Parade in Gillette in 2012. I just looked up the picture. And it was 2012, so it was just after the 2012 election, and it was a 307 powers the nation, and I don't know why we're at the light parade. We didn't have kids or anything, but we were just down there, like, you feel good about that. And then it said, "Buck off Obama" on a Holiday Light Parade float. Buck off, that was foul. There's kids here. It's like, this is not what this parade is about. And it seems to me that was real specific, and just really racist things. It seemed like it was, if it's a black person, then it's just easier to focus that on, and hating coal miners, and I don't think that was the case at all, I think.
And then, and unfortunately, I had invited Aftab Khan, who was unable to make it tonight because he was very ill, but he has been somebody who was very much hoping to join us all the time that we have been kind of putting this together. But then we had, he was part of opening up a mosque in town, and then very soon after, there was a Facebook page, Stop Islam in Gillette. And so there started to become some of this very racially charged language within the community. Can you guys kind of talk about your own perspectives on that time period? Because this was not, I think that happened in maybe 2014. It's been a couple of years back that the mosque opened, and we started to see some of that.
Two summers ago, a Quran was burned at Camplex
Yes,
Park.
yeah.
And that distinguishes a community in a way that I wouldn't want to be distinguished. That was in the summer. I was working up at my ecumenical retreat center. Gillette Against Hate formed, and I've been busy with them. We're a small
So
group.
Leah, you're a part of that
Gillette
group?
Against Hate.
And
yeah.
Tom, you're are as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else part
Yes.
of that group? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we are doing a Holiday Light Parade float, co-sponsored with the Salvation Army, and our
Yes.
float is Neighbors Helping Neighbors, Then and Now. And just to emphasize that this community has always been multiracial. The Khans are they're Americans, they're part of this community. as are
back
our
generations,
beautiful
back
generations, our beautiful Spanish-speaking community at St. Matthew's and throughout the community. You know, that's who we are, and hopefully, but that was a very jarring event, and it still needs to be in the
It
forefront.
sounds to me like it's not the actual community people that are doing these things. Because everybody that I've spent time with, they're not those type of people. They'll help, whether they're Hispanic, African American, even AFTAB. I actually worked for AFTAB when I first moved to Gillette for a while, until I found something a little bit better.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like it's what Gillette is. Because the people that I spend time with at the bowling alley, at the archery range, I even go out to the new gun club and shoot. And yeah, we're gun-toting, rednecks from Wyoming, if you want to be that way. But we will still stop and help. Doesn't matter who it is. We see somebody in trouble, we will stop and we
I
will
think
help.
that was a real minority of people that came up, and how you saw it was the protests that they would organize. There'd be 3 times
Right, exactly. Yes.
the other side
Yes, yeah.
protesting against them. So that gave us faith back in, the roots, just like you said. Most people, it was just they were just so ugly, that what they said, that I think it just, just rang horrible with us. But for the most part, I just think the majority of people who live in Gillette are very welcoming.
I'm certainly not arguing that point, but to the one person that experiences something, I mean, all we ever had was go back to Canada written in our car in the dust after we got a nice Canadian equality marriage in 2006. Like, oh, we were only there just to get married. But I don't ever want to discount what the effect is on a young child in a classroom that hears, you're going to get deported now. He's elected. You're going to get deported now. And young people hear that in classrooms. And it may not come up at the archery range or the gun club, but it comes up at a Gillette Against Hate meeting where a teenager might feel comfortable saying, yes, there's kids that celebrate Hitler's birthday at Campbell County High School. There's Confederate flags displayed at Campbell County
Isn't
High
that
School.
420?
Yeah, my birthday too. My birthday too, and
It
it's a
has
good
other
birthday.
420
It's a
might
good
have something else.
birthday. But, I mean, I understand. I'm fully aware of that, having subbed at the alternative school, et cetera. But no, I mean, honestly, and if they're not coming down to your spheres where you socialize and talking about it, they will talk about it at Gillette Against Hate meetings. So I'm glad that our
One of the things, not to minimize issues that any state or population of any state would have around issues surrounding difference. We have things in Wyoming that we have to pay attention to, and how we embrace difference, quite honestly. And even though it might be in the minority, we still have to educate those folks. Because I go back to even starting my career teaching in Midwest Wyoming, a small rural community. Most of the people that were there never got outside of Natrona County. And just as the mayor was complaining, we had to go back to D.C. and bring people to Wyoming to see what we are really about. We have to make sure that we can go out too and have Wyomingites understand, change a global perspective, if you will. Because I do fear sometimes if we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, then it's easy for a minority to condemn the rest of the world.
I totally agree with you guys. That when you don't socialize with a different culture, you don't understand their pain. And yes, there has been a lot of times where students do come up and say, make America great again, and then they talk about how they're being discriminated because of their color, or your parents don't speak English, or whatever the case may be. But it has been hard. We have felt very discriminated. There has been raids where people just hide in Gillette, where people hide because they're afraid that if they're going to be stopped at Walmart, they're going to be asked for documentation because of their color. And they have the right to do so, but they're afraid to even do that. So then they get people who are citizens like myself. They seek our help and they say, Jessica, can you go out and see if there is ICE here, if there's immigration enforcement here. And before, when I lived here, when I moved here in 2001, there was, for 3 years, 2-3 years, there was raids where we had to hide for 3 days in our homes before school, or during school time. And it was scary, it was sad, it was, we were afraid. There was maybe 50 families here. There's not very much discrimination, because now there's so much culture now. There's so many Latinos here. There's so many different other people here. But I do know that we still continue to be afraid. I am afraid for my people when there's something going on, when there's raids, whenever we don't feel welcomed, walking into, I was discriminated when I was in high school with what I thought were my friends. But now going back, I realized they were making fun of me. But I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. And now I think it's harder for our students to walk in and be afraid if they're going to be pointed at for something, only for their color, only for their culture.
Yeah, and so, maybe we have moved up in time to when Donald Trump was campaigning, and then he was elected, and I think that there was a sense of maybe excitement that a new president was going to help with some of the economic problems. And maybe there was a sense that, some of these immigration issues, I know that there was a lot of people that were hoping for him to build a wall. And so I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about that time period. And maybe from your point of view, especially, Jessica, what that was like to be living in Gillette, when Donald Trump was elected and was using this kind of rhetoric that maybe was a little scary for the Hispanic community.
Yeah, I think I brought my husband into the States. It took 6 entire years. Sometimes people come to me and tell me, Jessica, why can't they just get immigration status here? Why can't they just become residents? Well, it's not easy for you to become a resident. Someone has to petition for you to be here. If you don't have a future husband that is a citizen, if you don't have a sister, if you don't have a mother, if you don't have someone to petition for you, you are not able to get residency here. So my husband had been in Mexico for 6 years. I had been trying to bring him back. I like to joke around that I've had 8 honeymoons because I would go visit him. And I was fortunate enough for that because not many people have honeymoons, but or just have one. But it was hard. It was hard I was afraid. During that time, I thought, is he going to start crying? Well, he's sorry. I do so much for our community. Yeah. And I thought, will he stop my husband from being here? After so much that I do for him, not for him, so much I do for our people, for our citizens, for us, so much that I do. Will he stop my husband from coming into the States? And there was fear even with me doing everything right, the right way. They had told us on our final process it'll take 3 to 6 months for him to be here. And another, back in the years, it was within a month you were being approved or denied. And so my husband, it was 3 months and there was nothing. It was 6 months and there was nothing. Then there came anxiety. Then there came, which I'm telling you, there came anxiety for myself. Again, that discrimination for my other people, my people, for our people. It's our people. There came discrimination between that, and I thought, if I am afraid, what about those that are here who are trying to seek something better for themselves? And then it took 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. After 10 months, I thought, am I going to have to go back to Mexico to have a life out there? And then finally, with so much prayer of so many of you guys, my husband was able to come into the States. He was approved after 11 months. So I was afraid. I was afraid for my family, if he was going to get approved only because of the administration. And from there on, of course, there's more fear of the DACA program, deferred action for childhood arrivals. I have family members, I have friends that now are in fear of, will I be able to stay? After being given this opportunity, now it's being taken away from me for not doing something bad.
What is your husband's status at this point?
He's a permanent resident now.
And so that's a big relief, I'm sure.
Yeah, and what I have to say about that is my community members, a senator, a representative wrote a letter for me for my husband to come here. So there is that great unity between us. They didn't know my husband, but yet they wrote this letter because they knew that families should not be separated. And if we step away from that immigration, if we step away from you're an illegal to we want families to be together, then it would change our whole world. It would change our whole everything. But this community did help with that. My friends, my family did help with that.
From my perspective, you touched on something that is very important in that campaign cycle. I was very, very afraid of the rhetoric of fear that was being put forth by a number of candidates on either side of the issue, and from my perspective, I think Saint Yoda is right. From Star Wars, Saint Yoda. That because really, it says somewhere that fear not, because the Lord is with us. Fear not. And that's what Saint Yoda says, Luke, do not be afraid.
Yeah.
So during that, all I need to say is that during that time, I was afraid of the fear, and that was being disseminated on both sides of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Others responding to just this time period of as soon as once Donald Trump was elected and this kind of discussion of immigration, the travel ban for certain Muslim countries. How did that affect and just his election in general? Maybe we can move back a little bit to other thoughts about that time period in Gillette.
At my little office, my little service unit, we have no need for a social security number. If somebody needs help, they come in and they ask for help. If it's on a government grant, we have to use the social security number. That's the terms of the grant. But if a family comes to us and says they're hungry, we give them food. It's our responsibility. Partly because the Salvation Army is a church and it's my job as a Christian, and partly because they're my neighbors, they're my community, they're my people, and they need food, I'm going to give it to them. I'm also going to help them figure out how to fish for their own food next time. What's going on in your, doing a lot of budgeting and things like that. Well, we've become sort of famous for our financial talks and our pep talks and our helping people and emergency food pantry and all that stuff. But then there came this sort of dark cloud, and we had people hiding in cars and sending friends in to get food that had social security numbers. It's not even on the form. You don't even write the number down. It's just like your name, who lives in your house, and what's your address, for statistics purposes, of course. So we've been able to start a dialogue, and we have our form in Spanish, and we've been able to send a form out that says, it's okay if you come in, you're safe here. We have special food thanks to Gillette Against Hate and Leah and her campaign and her church. They brought in lots of Hispanic favorites, so we have whole bags of like masa flour and chilies and, corn husks and all kinds of groovy cookies and stuff. I don't know, but it's comfort food to our Latino friends. And so we've been seeing lots more of those people and been able to have those conversations. For about 5 or 6 months, it was pretty dark and it was hard to have the conversations. But I feel like we're breaking through. I feel like the community has come together and we are nurturing and loving these people and trying to help them feel safe. And I'm really glad your husband's here.
Yes.
But you mentioned, we've kind of talked a little bit about the issue of homelessness and poverty. How's that going in the community of Gillette right now?
Well, not related to the election, really. Just really related to the layoffs, the
Downturn,
large
yep.
numbers of layoffs, the 7,000 jobs lost in our state, and a lot of those, in Campbell County. I estimated helping 930 individuals for this last fiscal year that we just ended. And that's what I budgeted for. 1,660 people were actually helped, almost double what I had budgeted for, which was up 200 from the year before. So our numbers have really steadily gone up and up. The reason we started a food pantry was because we had so many people without food, and the donations are down all over town to the social service agencies. And so the food pantry that's at the Council of Community Services, their money is way down too. And so they are literally banking on donated food from the grocery stores in town. And then they get some commodities from the food pantry once a month. And so because their numbers are down too, as far as what they can buy into their pantry, we just decided to move some money from one area of service into food. And then we quadrupled it by doing food drives, and so many wonderful, benevolent people in this town. I've never met more generous people than I have met in Campbell County. I mentioned to you when we first came in that we're the only bell ringers in the whole western states that are all volunteer. 3,000 hours of volunteer service to ring the bell to raise money for us. And everybody just gives their time. I mean, the book's on the table now. Would you like to sign up, Melodie?
I have some time in the morning.
Okay, that sounds good. No, it's just, we've been really, we've been giving a lot of food, rent, and utilities. And we've been able to work together with the Catholic Church and all the churches really in town. I don't want to single anybody out, that have all come together, and they all give a little bit, and we're able to help pay somebody's rent or their mortgage or get their lights on, or something, keep them going. So we're able to work together as a community more than we did before. It used to be go to Salvation Army and get some help with rent, go to the council and get some help with food, you can go to the soup kitchen and get some lunch. Now we all band together, and we all meet together, and we all serve together. And I think it's working better. So I guess in that way it's been a good thing.
Yeah.
But times are tough.
But that's Gillette. That is
Gillette.
Wyoming
That
to
is
me,
Gillette.
because that pioneer spirit is still with us. That you help your neighbor because tomorrow it could be you.
Exactly.
And you don't do it out of self-interest. It's just out of community interest,
Right.
it seems. And that's one of the great things about living here. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, and you go to a city, something, you walk down the street, somebody sees a bum on the street, somebody steps over them, and somebody should do something about this. And that's the end of it, and they expect there's government to come in and solve it. Here, it's the citizens that do it. I mean, that's the experience that I have from living in Boston and Pittsburgh and in North Carolina, and to being out here. And this is much more the way things should be, and citizens
I went to-
standing up. De Tocqueville, for example, saw this in the original country, but anyway.
I went to a county commissioners meeting a couple of months ago representing Salvation Army, and they gave us kudos for us all working together, all these agencies in town, and how we've created this network. And they were really pleased and so grateful that we had banded together, especially since the county 1% funds were down and people were getting less grants. But we're still able to serve, and we've never turned anyone away. Not for lack of funds anyway, maybe for their lack of qualification.
So one of the things that's really been, on the minds of everybody in Wyoming is the possibility of, as we've, had this crunch and this energy downturn, is the idea of raising taxes. And I know that the city of Gillette kind of tossed around the idea of a 1/4-cent tax. Can you guys tell, just for Wyomingites who don't know what the 1/4-cent tax was, can somebody kind of explain that? And then can we talk a little bit about how the conversation went around the 1/4-cent tax?
Dr. Engler,
We're all
I'll wait
looking
for
at you. We all know you know.
How long is this recording going to be?
Give us your in a nutshell.
No, the 1/4% tax initiative was an initiative to really secure a dedicated funding mechanism for the college. For those who don't understand our college, we are very unique in this, and we're part of a district. Sheridan is the taxing county, if you will, and yet this particular college, Gillette College, has grown from a storefront 50 years ago to now a full-blown comprehensive community college residential campus without a tax base. And yet, And I tell people this a lot, that this is probably the only community college in the country that's grant funded. And our growth just does not allow us to continue to operate that way. So we've had dialogue with community leaders and state leaders for decades about what it would look like to have a dedicated funding mechanism to support our college, support operations of this college. And we finally settled on this 0.25%. It's an economic development tax. We are certainly an economic development engine and driver for the community. It was a means to support, hopefully, efforts to diversify an economy, to get us out of that boom and bust cycle, because I don't know that we can necessarily endure another bust like we just went through. It was painful, very painful for a lot of people, and I hurt for them. So we looked at it, and we had a community conversation. That's what we asked. If put it before the public, have a community conversation, and see whether or not they would be willing to tax themselves 1/4 penny to support higher education.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in my mind, it failed.
Yeah.
So we're back to the drawing board, but it was a very bad 3-letter word.
So I want to throw out a question with that. If we're such a helping community and we do help each other, why is it that we didn't get that? Because I think about it and I'm like, whoa, this is a great opportunity for our students, for everybody. Why did we not get that?
Yeah, could anybody want to?
I can probably answer that,
Yes,
because
please.
I was vocal on the no side for a number of different reasons, but principally because the tax wasn't just for the college.
Right.
It would have had over $1.5 to $2 million a year going to economic development, which has done some things in the town, but hasn't done enough to justify that kind of investment. It also would have put in jeopardy the 1% tax that we're going to have on the ballot next go around. And that 1% tax, those funds actually do a lot of good, and they keep utility bills down and help a lot of people within the city of Gillette. And so to see that put at risk, it just wasn't worth it. And I'd argue then, and Dr. Englert and I probably go back and forth on this, but that the tax itself wasn't necessarily the right funding mechanism, because it was going to be on the ballot every 4 years, I think, in 2020, and then every 4 years after that. And if the community's not doing well and needs to get rid of a tax, what happens when you lose that money? If you're expecting $4 million a year that you're not going to have, what's going to happen to the college then? We need to find a better way to fund that.
What's your suggestion then?
I would have a couple of suggestions. One, there's still part of a mill that's not levied by the county right now on property taxes that could go directly to the college. They could go there. We actually ought to honestly look at being our own community college district, which would take a lot of change. And there's lots of Michael shaking his head no, because it would take a lot of legislative stuff, and it just isn't going to happen. But those would be the ways you could possibly go. Going forward, what could we do? I think the economy right now is in such a difficult shape that any taxes of any type are going to be looked at very badly by folks, and because they don't want it, they're struggling to get by. And a lot of the effort on the no side was, hey, what about folks on fixed incomes? They can't afford a 1/4 cent, because what happens if we get a 2% tax or a percent raise out of the legislature, because they've got to balance their books, because we've got $400 million in education, and there's another $400 million, isn't there, as well? No, just that one. What's going to happen with those? If we have to get a sales tax rise out of that, how are people going to afford that and the 1/4% and all of this? Right now, you can't make. Things are so knife edge as to the way it's going to go, and there's lots of things that need to change. And I think that we're starting to see, there was just some consultants that just came out with a report at the state level that had suggestions for ways to improve how our state government operates.
Doug, I would argue, you said that you could do your job anywhere,
Yes.
right? Because you telecommute,
Sure.
I'm assuming. And what about all the folks that have been laid off from oil and gas and will maybe continue to be laid off from those fossil fuel industries, and they have no college and they have nothing to fall back on? What about them? Very expensive to go out of town to go to school.
Oh,
Their
without-
families are here.
Without question, you're right, and I don't think that, one of the first things that I did is that, I talked with Heidi Gross, and one of the things that I expressed to her was that I'm sad that the tax failed to the college because, I would have liked to support it, but I just didn't think it was the right method to do it, and so we have to find a better, different way to fund it, and whatever that might mean. Now, whether that means taking just less of a mill that we have that the county commissioners can levy and directing that to the college, okay, maybe that does it. It doesn't do it necessarily in the same way because it takes it, instead of being a sales tax, it's a property tax, and it's still substantially on minerals, but at least it's a way to go.
So it would
And
be a
it's
bigger
not-
burden on the mineral industry, because we explored all those things.
Yeah, no, and I understand, and I understand all of that. There's no good solutions. I mean, if you could have, the only one solution that would have been good is if there was a way to not have it on the back of that 0.25% of the economic development tax. But you couldn't do that either. I mean, so your kind of hands are tied. Maybe that's where we need the legislators to step in and help us find different ways to fund things and have better solutions rather than just saying, no, we can't do these things. We have to think outside the box, and maybe it does take 6 years till we get that. Till we get through that. It's not an easy problem to solve. I mean, Wyoming has a structural problem that we are so reliant on minerals. How are we going to get around it?
As a voter scratching one's head in the polling booth, I was really confused as to what the 0.25% sales tax was going to do. Was it for the college or was it for economic development? There was some confusion about that, and I think that had the initiative been for the college, I think it would have passed 100%. Had it been for economic development, I think it may have had a better chance. But when it was splitting hairs, I think that's where from my perspective, that's what killed the.
I don't think so. I think no matter what, the no voters would have been out. If it said
That's true.
tax, I just think it would have failed.
That's my sense too. And again, I mean, I looked through my glasses, and the lens that I looked through is, I thought we provided a compelling argument that it was factual, that we demonstrated growth, obviously demonstrated need. The need doesn't go away because the tax failed, so there are consequences to the community decision that was made. And I agree with the mayor that the reality is that there is a significant vocal no tax contingent, which we're just going to have to deal with. And you talk about civil discourse. This is a whole new era of dialogue, civil discourse occurring behind the computer screen, which was, and honestly, it lost civility. It really did. So, from an educational perspective, if we learn anything from this, we ought to learn how we educate others to participate in civil discourse using social media.
Right, yeah, yeah. So you felt like that things, like the conversation around the 0.25% tax became kind of disintegrated, and there was a lot of stuff going on social media that just was causing a little bit of a snowball effect. In terms of
that would be my
moving in.
interpretation. Yeah.
So, no, I think Doug and Tom brought up very good points as far as this probably wasn't the most perfect funding source and funding and vote for the college. It definitely was not, but it was the only one available. But you also have to remember that if we became our own college district, which we'd be number 8, I guess, in the state, that would rely on the mineral industry to pay for, because it'd be 2.5, 3 sort of mills we'd have to assess today, and the biggest property owners we have, and the ones that pay their ad valorem are the coal mines, the oil field. So that doesn't work. What we have is a taxing structure problem, and we need to change that and get us off of minerals. But that means sharing the burden amongst all of us a little bit more, and that would probably be very tough to talk people into these days. We saw that with this quarter-penny vote, but
We actually, 2 years ago, I think we inquired of many of our business partners, a lot of support locally, about how palatable a another half mil would be in creating another Bochis, which is a good mechanism for us. We got a resounding no way. Not exactly in those terms. I mean, you know.
Civil.
Yeah.
I think there's about a 0.9 or something of a mill left there.
Yeah,
Some roughly a 0.9 of a mill. And the only time we've assessed all 12 mills, the county commissioners have assessed it, was to build a tech center. And we guaranteed in particular the coal mines at that time, that it would go away once the tech center was paid for. And so that 0.9 lasted a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And then we raised the 18 million, I think it's 18. So that would have taken about 2 years, 2 full years, where we put the 0.9 on. That's the only time we've assessed all 12 mills. And we hear about it from every other county that assesses 12 mills. Like Campbell County does not assess their full mill value. And we could assess all 12, we don't. We do 11.16 something or other in there. So I don't think you'd ever get the 2.5 to 3 mills that we need to form our own district, but that'd be my argument.
So go ahead.
Well, we did try it back in 1992.
92 was it when we had to vote for or make our own district? Yeah.
And it really went down, because the coal mines were telling their people, if you vote for this, you'll have to admit,
You'll be
out of
unemployed, basically.
Oh.
So, but they were very quiet on this vote.
Yeah, they were. Well, Pat and Paul Ladke started it up, who owns Cyclone Drilling. So they, saying we support this tax because we support the community.
Do you think that it'd fly again at some point, and maybe next year or the year after?
Maybe not a special election.
Right,
that would have
yeah.
at least got more voters out.
Right, yeah.
And I do think a lot of the no vote, of course, more no votes got out this time, and maybe if you had it during a general election.
Yeah, and what Mark said about the civil discourse on the computer screen was very rapid, and and there was stuff in there that just absolutely was not true on the computer screen.
Right.
So, truth in journalism.
So what I'd like to do is switch gears to kind of starting to take a look, a big picture at what, now that we've kind of talked about what this history has been like, is to kind of start to look at some solutions and what are the problems, what can we do ourselves, what can our institutions do. But first we should go get some dessert. If you would like some, take a little break. Last little phase is just to kind of create sort of a collective vision that we might have for the community. I'm hearing a lot of actually I'm hearing a lot of agreement, and so if we could articulate where we agree in some ways, what you have heard people saying, and places that you are feeling like actually we do share some values, we share a certain vision for what we want from our community. Anybody care to start trying to put into words what it is that this group of people shares in terms of their vision for Gillette?
I'll start with something simple. I think we all agree that the college is a really important asset in our community and that we need to support it. Others? You're welcome.
Well, again, and I guess I'm filtering it through my ears, but I'm also hearing an agreement that as leaders in the community, we will go forward pushing back on the rhetoric of fear in town and that kind of discrimination that places on people.
Others?
Well, what I'm hearing is it sounds like everybody's in agreement that the Gillette community is a strong community and will persevere through whatever changes might come, through education, through community relations, both leadership and the working staff. And I think that's a good thing. Whether immigration being one thing, I know that's always been an issue. for years. But
Forever.
But the history of this country was founded on immigration.
Exactly.
And
right.
that is not a bad thing.
It's an awesome thing.
We are not all from, our bloodlines are not all from United States.
And I thank you for that, because that's so true. That's something that I wanted to speak about. But I think what happens is we don't speak about it enough, that people don't understand it, or that there is a need for it. And I think that's, I mean, family members are out there speaking about the situation. I'm not so much. I am on the grounds just helping those that are needing help. But I think if we can speak about it to our legislators, to those to say, hey, we do need help. We are founded on immigration, and it's not a bad thing.
And to your speaking about it, you know, you speak about something and you take the elephant out of the room, okay? And for example, Jessica and I work with the Suicide Prevention Coalition, and we did a lot of work in social norming, in talking about suicide in the community. And lo and behold, we saw in 2012, I think our numbers were as high as 20 suicides in the county, and we saw those numbers drop to about 8 in a couple of years. And
That's a big issue in our state.
Right, in our state. And so it's speaking about the issues in a calm, collective, intelligent, informed way, so you're not disseminating BS, and talking about the issues in a civil way.
Well, and just giving stats, 121 people die by suicide each day. If we can give that information out, it's like if an airplane were to crash with 121 people, would we all not want to say, wow, right?
Right, every day.
And I think if we give those kind of statistics in our community, because we do have a lot of discrimination, we do have a lot of that. Maybe not in the community as a whole, but as an individuals as a whole, we do. And I think if we speak it out, then we can really help each other.
So what I'm hearing is that you guys agree on the need to make people feel safe in your community.
Yes.
Yes.
Finding a
Yes.
way to make people feel safe.
Yes.
Are there ways that you can do that? Either you personally or your institutions, your nonprofits, how can you make people feel safe in this community?
The biggest thing is just give them the information. Make sure that people are going to make their own conclusions anyway, but if you give them all of the information, that's going to be the best way that you're going to show them this is how it should be, this is what you have. You're going to draw your own conclusions. Everybody is. It's free will. But if you get it out there, they're going to make the decision. I bet you anything, more than likely, just judging from the group at this table, we all have very similar mindsets, and I'll bet you money the community has the same.
And the single biggest thing, and Dr. Engler touched on it earlier about, you know, sitting behind a computer screen and people spouting this, that, and the other thing. I mean, I've heard it from both sides of the tax debate of, you know, these other people are awful and these other people are terrible too, from both sides. And for the same reasons, because everybody's saying, well, they did this and they did, well, the best thing you can do is get people to sit down and talk to each other. I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, within the GOP, one of the things I've been trying to do is get people to come. We have, you know, the way things are set up, you know, we have precinct people, blah, blah, blah. Come. If you disagree with us, all the more reason to come and be there. If you're a Republican, if you don't like what's going on, because we need to hear your opinion. We may learn something because you're willing to stand up and put yourself forward. I mean, the single greatest picture that I always just love, you remember probably not remember, but you've all probably seen the Norman Rockwell of the man standing up to speak at was it New England town hall or what have you. That's what we need to be, but it has to be like we are here, face to face, because it's really hard to demonize you when I have to look across the table at you, right? I mean, and I have to shake your hand. You can't do it because you realize, wait, we share a lot of things in common. And that's, you know, Michael and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but he is one of the politicians that I look up to more than anybody, because he will stand up and tell me exactly where he stands and do it even when it's not in his best political interest, which I think is a very, very rare thing. And so we need more people to have that kind of courage.
Well, thank you for that, Doug, but
I'm
I'm not sure I carried, yeah, that was kind of a shameless plug, wasn't it? You're gonna be my campaign manager next time?
Like I said, we disagree, remember?
I forgot about that little aspect. But if I can switch gears for just a minute
that's
here.
fine.
One of the things I've noticed, and Doug can attest to this too, is the fact that our social clubs, our civic clubs are losing membership.
Mhm.
You go to the Rotary clubs, you go to the Lions clubs, whatever, they have 8 or 12 or 18 maybe main people that show up pretty much every week or every other week, but they don't show up like, well, when I first joined Rotary, we had 50 some regular members that came every time. 40 was a bad week. Now it's like 12. But we're still getting projects done in this community, which is a great thing. And if you've noticed, what we call it, Lasting Legacy, the retirement home there, they just built that. And you probably don't know a lot about it, but it's a gorgeous place. And so the park right next to it, which was all volunteer built over 20 years, all the trees planted by our county and park, county rec department planted the trees, but basically all the work was done by volunteers. And so they said, we need to light these, and so the county parks group said they would do it. They would supply the labor, but they needed about $2,500 to buy the lights. They got a little over $5,000 donated in a couple, 3 weeks. It was done over coffee one day with a couple guys that just sitting around saying, hey, it'd be nice to light some of those trees. And man, $5,000 showed up, and they will add more next year and more the year after that. And so even if we're not getting the civic clubs to come together and to get their membership up, we're still getting the projects done, and they're all volunteers.
Yeah. What about, we've talked a little bit about economic diversification. What can we do? What are some of the irons that are in the fire right now? Maybe small businesses that are starting to grow, things like that. What are some of your ideas for how to grow the economy and really diversify it? Other thoughts about that? What are some solutions there?
Melody, one of the things that we talked quite a lot about during the campaign was the role education plays in diversifying the economy. You generate an educated workforce. And the other thing that we talked about is Gillette is just a profoundly strong blue-collar community, hardworking, technically skilled employees, but still singularly focused on a particular segment of the economy, extraction industry. What we have to do is take that same blue-collar, highly technically skilled workforce and help them become entrepreneurs. Small businesses, 25 to 50 employees. We have all the things that you need: rail, air, and interstate, and smart, hardworking people to have light manufacturing, to have any number of manufacturing units, small business units that can be affiliated with either the creation of prototype products or supporting other industries. And I worry that we're not going to get there. I worry that we will say, okay, we've survived this downturn. Things are going to level out. We've defined a new normal. Let's wait till the next one. And that's a real concern for me, because just as Michael says, we've lost some people in our service organizations, and I've seen that too. So it's a silver-haired organization right now. Who's stepping up next? And if my kids and my kids' kids don't have a place to call home and work, we talked about safe, that we want to be able to save community. Well, we have to build a secure community as well, so it's safe and you have a good job. If they don't have that for my grandkids and great-grandkids, they will go somewhere else to find it. And that's the bottom line. It will happen, and we won't be able to stop it.
Right, yeah. What about that? Those of you who are parents, you know, how is it that your kids can feel like they want to stay? What's going to encourage them to want to stay?
Probably a cultural change here.
I agree.
You know, has a lot to do with the post-college, or the 18-year-olds, I should say, post-high school, wanting to come back here, wanting to stay here. They need that nightlife. They need something else besides what Gillette offers, which is generally a good job, or has been in the past, and a high wage. But, you know, the white picket fence only goes so far, and it will only cover somebody that's willing to settle down, wants to settle down, get married, have the family. So I think it needs we need a cultural change. And going back to what Mark had said earlier, the governor has that endowed initiative going out. And the one thing that they picked is the number one reason that companies move to or expand in any one area is a trained workforce. Unfortunately, Wyoming, even if we are all trained in the skills, whatever level they wanted, we just don't have that many people here. And that, you know, lack of population actually hurts us. I mean, it helps us, many of us appreciate that. But the lack of population, the second thing they recognized as being the reason that a company would move there or expand was either air service or broadband connectivity. And so those are the other two. And you know connectivity because that's what runs your business. But you're a sole proprietor. You know, when you get a big data center that wants to come in or move in, which doesn't create a lot of jobs, but initially construction and some tax revenue and some property value, they want that cable in the ground, they want that fiber in the ground already, they want that broadband. So we're not sure how Wyoming's going to adapt. They do better in the 20 to 30 people type industries, and not the new Amazon headquarters of 50,000 jobs. That just won't happen in the state, but we are trying to identify the businesses that we can bring here.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. I was thinking, why do the Spanish Latinos stay here? And I think it's a lot of that culture that with the Catholic Church, we do a lot of gatherings. I mean, there was 11 weddings this past weekend that came together to get married. So there was a huge party. I mean, it was just a lot of fun.
I missed it.
And it's that thing is that we get together. We do we do different night things, but we're always together and doing that cultural nightlife because we don't have that here in our community.
Yeah, I thought the attraction was the weather.
Have you looked outside? I think the innovation, like what Mark was talking about, though, I think that when my daughter finishes up her first 2 years of school and goes away and hopefully gets a degree in something, maybe social work, maybe she'll be like her mom, I want her to come back because, you know, we have a little ranch in Rosette, we have lots of animals, we're doing our thing, and we're not quite ready to retire. So I'd love to have her come back, but unless there was something really fun and new and innovative for her to work in, because she's that girl. She is a Gen Zer, I guess she is. She's not going to come back. She's going to end up in Denver, or she's going to end up in Seattle, or something.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I mean, what would bring them back?
Yeah.
I see that, and I see some positive things with what the mayor was saying about, you know, keeping coal going in some context. Gillette remaining an energy capital. I love it, the energy capital. Well, there's so much diversification in energy. It can go on through coal. It can go on through, we live in a palatial 1970 single wide that we just love. It's got sun. It can have, you know, solar panels on the roof, you know, and we're not doing the kind of things that could add in, that could be innovative. My eyeballs go over there, Civilian Conservation Corps in Campbell County. You know, there's a lot of things that can be done to employ people, government-wise, too. That was a great program at the time. But I hear about things like, you know, energy audits in people's homes. We lose a lot of energy out of our homes, and you know, I hear in other communities about good programs started where people are trained to go in and find out where the leaks are, that people are trained. It doesn't take a ton of education, it takes some technical education, and it's overall good for the environment. And I wanted to also say that great communication, Wyoming Public Radio, folks. If you're not regular listeners, it's a great source of information. It really, really is. It's super balanced. And I hope this is just the beginning of other conversations. You know, I just have to speak to being a Catholic too. And Doug Gerard's a Catholic, me, Leah Vader's a Catholic. And, you know, we come from a church tradition that says, welcome the stranger, that says, care for the least of these. And yet we see a lot of Catholic support for politics that's like, you know, us first, me first, just me, more for me. And I always want, I want less for me and more for others, kind of. I feel like I'm doing fine. I want other people to do better. I don't want to see desperation in my community. I don't want to see fear in my community. And hopefully this is, you know, an opening to some of these conversations.
Yeah. I interviewed Representative Tyler Lindholm recently about a story that I was doing on local food type of stuff. And he said that's one of the areas that we all agree on. I covered the whole Food Freedom Act thing a lot. And he says, that, you know, that's one way to get the right and the left together. We agree. It's the people in the middle, he says, that are sometimes the problem, but you know, that there's a lot of people out there in our community interested in doing trying some agriculture, trying small businesses, growing food. That seems like an area where we're all sort of exploring some of those ideas. And I know that Gillette is one of the places where a lot of people are really trying some. Are you guys feeling a little bit like there's some agreement in that area? Getting back to sort of those agrarian roots. Anybody know anything about that?
Got great farmers markets and an awesome community garden.
I know, it's really good farmers.
Dry as it is, people grow some good
People grow things.
Well, you know, I think, you know, to wrap up, maybe, you know, what are you thinking we can do? What are some solutions for this problem, like you have mentioned, of social media, that there's just this willingness, because you're masked, to say things that aren't civil. And in a small town, that can be really wounding. What are some solutions to get people to unmask themselves from social media and step out from behind their computers and face each other and get to talking? What are some things we can do right here in Gillette to help with that?
I don't know if it kind of wraps that up, but someone wise told me to stop living condemning those that hurt me, but to actually start living life for those who are in need, and then we will find hope. So I think that for me, that's just helping others, which we do already, but then we'll find hope in our community.
So maybe like inviting more people out into some of these organizations that you mentioned, trying to get them involved and participating at, you know, ringing bells, getting them involved in some of these community in person. Is that kind of what you guys do?
We have a lot of great, very small though, organizations in town. We have PFLAG, we have Gillette Against Hate, we have the county GOP, we have the Campbell County Dems, we have Living Blue in Campbell County. Like we have, I'm a Democrat, so I can name all those ones really easily. But we have these organizations that we can get together. Wouldn't it be fun if we all got together at the Camplex one day and had, you know, bring your organization to the Camplex Day or something, and we all just like came together and had a, I don't know, popcorn and a candy cane. I don't know, something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I was.
Oh, we could go to the college. You have a nice big space.
We've got space, absolutely.
Dang,
We love
glad you're
people
sitting
coming
here.
out there, yeah. I was reading an article the other day about a student dispute on a college campus, and I can't remember the campus. Anyway, it was being, the war was being waged online in social media. And what the students said was, all right, that's enough. We're going to put the phones down and shut the computers off for the week. And we're going to come together and we're going to address the issue. And that's that generation that's going to make the call. Because I can stand in a faculty meeting, or I can stand in a staff meeting, or I can go tell faculty to tell their students to X, Y, Z. But until the generation that's using it steps up and identifies the ground rules, or says, let's drop it for a while and get together and have the face-to-face, it will become an infection. Because it's more than here. You know,
Oh, it's-
I'm a real Denver Bronco fan, so I'm watching, you know, somebody puts on there that, well, we ought to fire the coach. And the thread
Yeah.
that ensued, it was incredible and foul. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, one, is that all people have time to do?
Did you watch the game?
Oh, yes. I'm still a fan. You know, I'm the eternal optimist on most everything. But I think, you know, we're going to have serious conversations, generational conversations about etiquette and what that means in a social environment.
How can we get that generation to engage in that conversation?
I don't think it's generational. I think it's actually just anybody. Once you can anonymize yourself, boy, people
Yeah,
let
that's
things go. And you know, so much today. We're all busy. I mean, how difficult was this to put together?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
Very.
There's only what 12 of us here. You know, to get everybody to take time out and go talk to your neighbors and that kind of thing, which is, you know, quite honestly, is one of the nice, unique things about Gillette. Is for me in Wyoming, I know my neighbors, and we get along. And you know, one neighbor cuts the side of the road for me with the lawn, or the grass there, so I don't have to worry about it. And I make sure that I go down and I smooth the road, and we never really talked about it, just what we do. You know, I could take my road grader and just go down and do the road, that kind of thing. But getting folks to talk to each other and just take that step away is going to be the hard part. I mean, this 0.25% tax is, I know you won't agree with this, but as small an issue as it really was, I mean, because it's really not that much money we were really talking about. Daggers were drawn, and I just put off by it, honestly. I was really kind of, it was really kind of a sad thing to see. We need to have people talk more face to face and stop villainizing just somebody. You're not evil just because you disagree with me. You know, and so many people don't think like that these days. Right. If you're of this tribe, you're wrong. Right. You're an evil person.
Right. We can agree to disagree agreeably.
Yep.
Right. We can do that.
It seems to me the administrators of whatever the Facebook group is, you know, has responsibility and culpability in allowing that kind of thing to go on. It, you know, perhaps if it's a heated argument, then you take away the ability for somebody to post without being approved. And you just remove posts that aren't okay. I mean, I run a group for something else I'm involved in that's nationwide, and I have to look at every single thing before it goes out there because there's kids on my group, you know, and that's how that goes. So, I mean, why not just be more responsible as Facebook page owners, or whatever we are.
Yeah, it feels like that what's going on Facebook isn't happening in your community, but it is.
But it is.
And if you can think of it as this is part of my community, and I'm interacting with my community, my neighbors, then that's a different way of thinking about your interactions online. Yeah. Well, I think that this is kind of where I was hoping to head, but is there, you know, reactions to this discussion? Anything that you guys would like to say in terms of what you know, how this went? How it could have been improved? What did you learn?
Other than maybe bringing up, you had done your homework on us anyway, and you'd thought of a few topics, and I think that would be important, is to have the correct topics relative to whatever community you're in.
Yep.
Because these topics wouldn't work in Jackson.
That's right.
So you need to do that. I think as the moderator, the more topics, the more relevant topics, which you did a good job tonight, by the way.
Thank you.
Need to be brought up per that community.
Yeah.
So one other thing I might suggest, because I don't know how you decided who you're going to invite, but when you have these conversations, because we are all sharing the responsibility of raising the next generation of leaders.
Yeah.
So where are the 25-year-olds sitting around this table?
Yeah, good point.
Because they have voice too, and we ought to hear that.
Yeah. That's good. Very good suggestion. I had hoped to try and do that, but didn't quite work out, but I know how that
You,
goes.
you can even track me down very well. couldn't you?
Yeah, I know, it was hard enough.
Jessica's our token millennial.
Yeah.
Too.
Alex.
I'm actually pushing 40. So.
Yeah, no, we're back to Jessica.
Free there.
Yes, I do.
Other thoughts about the, you know, and how this could translate over to other, you know, making sure that these types of events can continue.
I like the idea of getting the millennials at the table. I
That's a
really
great
do. I
idea.
like the idea. Where are all your friends, Jessica?
Well, I think it's true because sometimes we may not follow what legislation is doing, or we may not follow those kind of things, but we are following social media. We are following the negative things of our life, but we're not following those kind of things. And this opens up the opportunity for me to, wow, I need to read this information and preach it to my friends.
Got to be able to get them the information that they need
Exactly.
to show them, to give them the facts about it.
Yeah.
Both sides. I mean, there's always going to be two sides to every debate, but you got to get them the facts of it.
Exactly.
And what are their needs? You know, what do they need to stay in our community? We're talking about what we think they need, but what do they actually need?
That might be the next, that might be the
Why would
next
they
one of
want to
these.
stay,
Yep, yeah.
other than a job?
No,
maybe?
I like that idea. I think that's my next
I think
job.
this is a really healing step, and I think it's a really positive thing. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. I was a little nervous coming.
Yeah.
I was like, oh gosh, we're going to get in a big fight about, you know, Obama versus Trump. Like, what's going to happen? But, you know, the break bread idea and the whole communal feel, and it was a lovely conversation, and I got to know everybody here better. And I'm not a real adversarial kind of person anyway, which is probably a good thing. But I really enjoyed everybody's point of view, and if I see you on the street, I'll give you a hug or something, because that's what I do.
Even if we don't ring the bell, right?
Yes, Michael, I'll let you off the hook this year.
All right, well, I know that Alec has a bowling,
Coolly.
oh, I'm sorry, pool.
Tomorrow night.
That's what keeps him here.
25-year-olds.
If there is any, there's plenty there actually.
I think it'd be great to share this conversation with the people we do work with and interact with, and just say, you know, the more we can be open with each other, even if we do not disagree, it's very helpful to be. That's what I feel. It's just, you know, it seems like we're just
Well, it's the
this side to
tension.
side.
It's the tension in between.
We have to open up. Even, you know, you just have to get out of your feelings.
Doesn't have to be a winner and loser kind
Right.
of thing.
Right, and minorities can have voices without the majority being so afraid of, you know, being 70% instead of 80 or 90%. You know, it's,
And by them being vocal about their concerns, the minorities, like we're talking
yeah,
about,
and it's,
they may even open up to some of the majority. And open the ears and open their eyes a little bit more as well.
It's one of the hardest things to do is to have a good argument where you can listen and you can learn something. And
Oh,
when
you're
you-
married
when it-
too.
when it- when it-
That's very true. All right, well, thank you all so much. Thank you for coming.
It was great.
This was wonderful.
Appreciate
Being
it.
persistent. getting
Yes, I
hold of us.
know. Wasn't easy getting you all around.
She was terrific, huh?
No, I did.